All right, I think we can get started. Full disclaimer, I hope many of you know that, but it's a talk, it's in the schedule, but it's actually slightly different than the regular talk. It's a birds of a feather session. So thank you, ChatGPT or whatever, for the weird-ish image. I have a few slides, a few sort of things on my mind that I will throw at you, but I hope this will be more of a conversation. All of you are Zephyr people, or are there people more from the rest of the conference? Because I'm actually interested in the latter, if there are any people. Because it's also about sort of exchanging, and you might be involved in other projects, open source projects, or anything really. Basically talking about all things documentation. Are there things that other projects do that we could get some inspiration from? And obviously, like what is missing potentially in Zephyr? There was a BoF last year at ZDS 2023 in Prague, Documentation BoF, where some topics were discussed. I want to sort of give a quick update on some of the things that were achieved or accomplished by the project since then. And again, this is, I mean, maybe not for you in the room, but some people might end up stumbling upon the recording of the session or the slides and might find some of the things that we implemented to be useful for their own projects. So there's that. And then, yeah, open discussion. And thank you, Anas, for advertising the talk on our WhatsApp. Hopefully more Zephyr people will join to discuss what they think we could be doing better, we could be doing more of. What are some of the things that make your lives, maybe as contributors, maintainers, too difficult, like maybe some of the documentation tooling or whatever is painful. We should certainly discuss that. But yeah, some of the things over the past few surveys, and if you look on Discord or if you talk to people at conferences and whatnot, some of the complaints in the past around Zephyr and its documentation have been around the fact that it's hard to navigate the documentation. Things like I'm navigating the documentation of a particular subsystem. It's kind of hard to find specific samples for this subsystem. Similarly, like what are for a particular board, what are some of the, like what are the drivers and the peripherals that are supported. We lack some of that, so there have been some improvement in that regard. And another complaint was the search is useless, basically. So quick update on both fronts. In terms of navigability, we are leveraging the fact that our documentation framework / engine, Sphinx, is actually quite extensible. So there's dedicated annotations that one can use. And if you're interested in contributing new code samples or maintaining some code area for which this hasn't been adopted just yet, please have a look. Effectively, it allows to add just enough metadata to the header of a sample's documentation README, so that not only we have a consistent way to sort of describe, give a name and a description to each and every sample, but also a way to indicate what is or what are the relevant APIs that this sample basically is a good demonstration of. And so you probably didn't know or didn't remember that there is actually a PS2 driver and PS2 support in Zephyr. And so the one sample that we have is effectively referencing the API, like the deoxygen identifier of the API group for PS2, which means that to the point of navigability, should you stumble upon the PS2 overview and like reference API reference page, you have the blue box thingy that lists all the samples that are applicable. Not a big deal to some extent, but that's I mean, people seem to like it. We will talk a bit more about maybe how we could do things even better in terms of sort of standardizing the way we document subsystems to surface even more information. I think it would be useful, like similarly to the way there's now this ability to quickly know about samples that are relevant. There is this one thing that you can actually see here where whoever authored this page many years ago, I'm sure, they did, and I think that was the right thing to do, they they thought it would be useful for people to know what's the name of the main kconfig that turns the subsystem and the functionality on or off, except that we have no standard way to do that. So it's up to the maintainers to think about listing those kind of options. Maybe we can build some kind of infrastructure to make it more mandatory and more systematic, that people would list those kind of things. Similarly, I think, and kind of digging into the rest of the conversation for later, but I think it might be useful to surface better what are some of the dependencies, at least at a really, really high level, of a particular subsystem. We hear a lot, and again, back to developer surveys and just like general feedback people make on Reddit and whatnot, like Zephyr is bloated, for the lack of a better word. Like Zephyr is like too many layers of dependencies, blah, blah, blah. It could help if, I think, if for each subsystem or each piece of functionality, we would give a sense of what it is you're pulling, if anything, when you're enabling the functionality. NVS, like you want to use non-volatile storage, like what is the overhead? Not necessarily in terms of like actual footprint, but more in terms of giving a sense of whether you're going to need to enable crypto as a mandatory feature. If yes, then well, maybe you don't want to use the functionality, or you want to reconsider it. Yeah, so well, that's kind of a digression. We can talk more about that. Let's finish it up with some of the things that were added. People were complaining about the search. So what we had at our disposal with Sphinx, which we still do, is not necessarily the best at ranking the results. So one thing we did late 2023 was to add support for Google programmable search. So basically embedding Google with our own look and feel and our own style in the documentation itself, so that people can search faster and more accurately. It's still sort of opt-out, I guess I should say. Like people can still use the old system if they want to. But yeah, that's a feature that the project is actually funding. It's maybe a couple $100 a month or something like that, to be transparent here. So that's the stats. During the weekdays, there's 1,000, 2,000 kind of queries that are being performed. As an FYI, just like last year, I don't know if you remember, I was also sharing those metrics. I mean, take them for what it's worth, but it's kind of interesting that the vast majority of the kind of information that people are looking for is what you would call basic, I guess, to some extent. ESP32 ranking 4th is also an interesting factoid when it comes to the popularity of this particular platform. But yeah, and that's actually interesting also to have. I mean, we now have access to those kind of statistics, and so GPIO, top query, top search term, sort of. If you try and search for GPIO using the old system, not even the top 3 results were really useful. Now it's kind of better because you get the real thing as the first result. Sure, we could have fixed probably maybe the Sphinx thing and build our own search engine infrastructure, but that's not what we do, I think. So we'd rather use what's available out there. With that, I hope we can sort of open it up for discussion. Some of the things that, as a documentation manager or co-manager, some of the things that come to mind in no particular order, and I might have forgotten important things, but in general, I find myself spending a lot of time. It feels like I'm nitpicking, frankly, when I'm doing this kind of feedback, so that's why I want to discuss it, but making sure that our documentation is consistent is kind of tricky. We might be missing some guidelines, but I wonder if we want to look at some tools. I was playing with a tool the other day with like one thing that I found as both a consumer of documentation or a maintainer that reviews new documentation. Sometimes you would have a fairly long and like legacy-ish documentation page which people keep adding to. It kind of shows when people just add stuff that they write in their own tone, they don't necessarily think about making sure that it fits with the rest of what was already there, right? Like I don't remember exactly what kind of PR or what kind of area it was the other day, but someone was literally adding a bullet point to a list that was talking to the developer in the third tense, and whatever they added was doing it like differently. And it was like, you can, and then the fourth bullet point was doing it differently. I mean, maybe I'm that kind of OCD sort of like thingy, but I think you get my point. Maybe we can have some either better guidelines of tooling, so I don't know what people think around that. Similarly, or I mean not similarly, but do we want to do things differently when it comes to all things images? We keep obviously getting more and more in the tree. Sometimes they are either too big, or we're ending up getting new diagrams that we cannot really make edits later on because people just submit a fancy diagram that they created with whatever tool, and then that can become a challenge. And then there's, this discussion around subsystem templating. I don't know, like, is that a good starting point? Are there other even more important topics that people have on their minds and they want to provide feedback on? Because like, if it's going to be a monologue, we can all go and have drinks anyways, probably. So, thoughts? Yes, please. To read.
Because this is, in my opinion, we can have the fanciest and the best documentation out there. If people don't see that, that would be a problem. This is like number one issue that I see. People ask, oh, where is this documented? And you know, it's sometimes it's a challenge, you know, to the point because we have a lot of information. So this could be like maybe this is a problem that you get lost in
Yep.
in the forest. You don't see the trees basically. Or people just maybe they still think we don't have the right search engine. Or I don't know. Yeah, but there is there's a gap here that people don't even try to go and find the documentation. There could be a problem there that we have to solve first before we go into the details.
Yep. Bricks. But and the reference as in like the top level URL or something more specific? I guess. Yeah. And is there a pattern of like some particular areas where questions keep coming and coming? Okay. Yes.
So new to Zephyr-ish, maybe about a year or so, kind of off and on. And heard talk about iterable sections, which was like new to me, right? So like, I got the documentation right here. This page contains a reference documentation for iterable section APIs, really, which can be used for defining iterable areas of equally sized data structures that can be iterated on using struct section for each. And it tells you usage, and then it goes couple things there, and then it goes API reference. And so it's like, to me, I'm like, okay, I still don't know the rationale, right? Like,
Yep.
like there's a lot of holes in there's some areas where it's like really good, and it digs into, okay, why this kind of thing exists. But there's other things like this that are like, okay, why would I can see the code, but like, why would I?
Yeah, it feels like someone wrote the documentation because they were asked to, and
Yeah, there's a lot of detail, but like when you make it when you're defining something and you use iterable,
yeah.
iterable, right, and you're not using other words to describe that, or you're not saying, the rationale of why this would be, useful. You're just kind of getting into it from a perspective of like, I already know how to use this, so I'm going to write a doc page on it. But if you're trying to use it like as a kind of a tutorial, explain to people why this exists in Zephyr,
this is like a template that we used to have, like
Yeah.
concepts, etc., but we are not following through. And that goes back to what
Concepts should be a mandatory thing.
or rational, whatever.
Yeah, yeah.
We need input.
Yeah. But you don't know why.
There's an issue about that. Do you want it now?
That's-
No, I understand what you're saying. Yeah, because we have this discussion before. Yeah, I agree.
Going back to the search for a second, is the default option now the Google search or is it still the legacy space search?
Default is Google. If you browse the latest documentation, if you browse a, say, 3.6, it would default to the built-in, because when you browse an old version of the docs.
Yeah, I think I've had it where I've gone back to the older documentation and still exactly the same. Okay.
Yes, that should be the behavior. Yeah, come on.
Is there, I don't know if there's a way of saying simple part, like getting feedback on the documentation in the sense of saying, like, you know, was this useful, thumbs up, thumbs up, you know, something so that way we can kind of, you know, we have so much documentation, and I'm sure there's places like where you read that, you're probably like, yeah, this was.
Oh, right, yes. Yeah, because I was going to say, yeah, it's there, but no, you're saying something different. Not reporting an issue, but rather acknowledging that you.
Yeah, right, so that, then at least there's an identification that says, hey, somebody, you know, we can take a look at this thing that, hey, we've got
Yeah.
60 downvotes.
Yeah, or 0, which is also an indicator of nobody ever found it, ever. Yep, I don't know, like there's the whole maybe GDPR and whatever info we might need for that, but yeah, I like that actually. Yes.
Write the best case of documentation in the Zephyr project and get a reward.
Is somebody take notes? Is somebody taking notes? I mean, it's recorded, I guess. Yes. Yeah. Good. More. Yes, please.
Just wonder about like when sometimes there may be some inconsistency or the system is lacking some detail on the page. Whether there can be a more direct link to like who to ask, the original developer or something about that feature, or kind of flag something as okay, this part needs some improvement. Because not everyone might like.
Yep. Yeah, mapping the pages to the sort of the area they belong to. Yeah. The question is when in a so tell me if I'm wrong or if I when a particular area seems like it could something's wrong with it or like could use some improvement. Who should I reach out to, or like is there like a Discord channel or a like is that what you kind of?
Yeah, and like, could there be a form that you could submit that maybe it can get redirected automatically?
So that I think there kind of is on a particular page. If you see something wrong with it, you can directly like the usual problem. You can directly open an issue about it. So it sort of like gives you already sort of a direct link to open an issue, which might or might not be a good idea because you're going to effectively open a ticket, whereas maybe you just had a question. So yeah, I guess what you're saying is maybe something else could be done to. Yeah, but the point is that it might not be exactly an actual problem. It's more like something that's unclear. So yeah, I don't know. I don't think I have a good answer. Yeah. Yes.
Going into like finding issue, I don't understand the concept of
Yeah, but just being like meh, it wasn't great. Yeah.
If you get meh,
Yeah, I know. That's like, yeah, you know that is generally wrong. Yeah, yeah. And 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 yeah, getting started might be a really good candidate for really bad ranking.
What pages get hit, and I'm sure like getting started probably gets hit the most, or but then are there some pages that we looked over several weeks, like they just people never go to, right? Or something you know.
Well, yeah, there are. I didn't. We don't have the best infrastructure to pull those numbers and to exclude bots, etc. I remember doing that in the past. Well, I can tell that, for example, the PDF nobody looks at because it's often broken and nobody seems to. The PDF, like it's a page among others, I guess. But yeah, there might be. Yeah, the stats. I think we were talking about it with Stefanos and Fabio at some point. Like, we would require some kind of infra to run proper stats and like GDPR compliant stats, but maybe we need that. Yeah. Yeah, well, actually, so that briefly, and I know there's many raised hands. Briefly, Keith was telling me the other day, and it might be related, for each page or like subsystem documentation, having some related resources, links, including like, here's a really good ZDS talk from Marty from 2 years ago about device 3. Here's an awesome, like, if you love semaphores, like, look at, right. And yeah, exactly. And so those in like related resources would be relevant Discord channel for the.
okay, so that's where I want to push that. Yeah. If we start adding like from each section, there's a Discord channel. The Discord channels, just look at Discord right now. I have no idea who can actually deal with the hundreds of channels that we have. Yeah, we really need to be careful there.
Well, I mean, we wouldn't be creating new ones. Like, I think that's the.
Yeah, at least one channel. Yeah, so people can talk about it.
Tu peux prendre un micro, s'il te plaît.
But the channels should be linked to pages, in my opinion. Like there's this page on, I don't know, I2C, and then you have a
En fait, le gars de Marc est sourd, c'est pour ça que vous avez filé des micros. Ouais.
There was also a good point about crosslink. I don't know if there is any tool for that. Probably there is, but it would be good to have more cross-references to crosslinks, but it also need to strike a fine line
Yep.
between
Yeah.
overloading people with things needs to be accessible as well, yeah, because like different countries don't have access to different resources. Yeah, like Discord, for example, in China they can't access it.
Yep. If you guys don't mind using the mic, I know
Yeah,
that
sure.
it's not necessarily the best setup, but we have people recording, and just for accessibility, really good. Thanks.
Yeah, I'm just intrigued to hear more about your thinking around sort of like maybe developing a bot or something like that that can actually ingest both your Discord feeds as well as your documentation. Because I've noticed that like a lot of companies are starting to have bots that are trained specifically on your own, on your own documentation and data set. And they're actually like pretty impressive with what they can do. So people can come in and that could field a lot of just like easy discussions.
So you mean chatbots? Like
Yeah, yeah.
Something that would
Yeah, they're
provide suggested answers, sort of stuff?
Yeah. So like if you have a question about I2C, the chatbot would actually probably go, well, here's the pointer to the documentation. Here's a bit of example code.
Yeah, it's like the let me Google that for you thing, but more.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm just saying that there are a lot of companies are sort of heading that way with having that as the interface to documentation as opposed
Yeah,
to
yeah, I know.
that
You're right, yeah.
I think users coming to Discord, they're not looking for a bot. They're looking for somebody to chat with about a given subject. So feeding them to a chatbot and nobody then responds because, well, the chatbot already responded. I think that will actually be a worse service than what we have today.
And I think this is digressing. It's not this topic here. This talk is not about how do we help the community. It's about how we improve the documentation. We really need. I mean, we can have bots and so on, but at the end of the day, the documentation as we have it is really the source. And how we, I mean, if somebody likes to print stuff or likes to open, you know, a web page and look at that, that really need to be
exist.
need to
that,
exist first in the best way possible, in the best form, using the best infrastructure, search, and so on. And all of that, you know, Discord and I don't know, chatbots, etc. This is okay. It's all nice and can be done, but first we need to deal with this. Yeah. It's my job. I'm actually hosting this.
Thank you. You had mentioned that you had gotten some feedback about our documentation. In that feedback, did anybody point to somebody that's doing it better? Is there an open source project?
So, really good question. I think I actually removed some slides from last ZDS because with regards to things being more practical there. I would need to pull it up, but I mean, yeah, FreeRTOS was mentioned. Nothing more. I know for a fact that I'm looking to things like Riot OS for on the topic of specifically of boards and like answering this question, which comes quite often, which is your board supported in Zephyr? And maybe now with hardware model v2, we are in a way better place to do that. But like, is Nucleo blah 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 supported? Like, they have something that's arguably slightly better. Like, it only allows to search through a few criteria, but that I would be interested in improving. Don't know if Riot does it much better, but they have what's considered a good documentation, in my opinion. And there might be projects that have nothing to do with autosys, which we might want to look at too.
Yeah, this is, I think, something we try to do multiple times. And I remember doing something like that. I showed you that, yeah. That's where actually infrastructure becomes relevant here. Because if you try to do that with Sphinx, that's probably, I don't know if that's going to work. Yeah, so we need to figure out how to go beyond the infrastructure that we have to provide this type of value, yeah? Actually, a relevant question to that is, for example, the APIs, yeah? And how we integrate API documentation in RST right now, and also provide the you know, the Doxygen information as well, and having discrepancies and having things out of sync and things documented in one place but not in the other place, and so on, yeah? So it's very important that at least, and probably that's actually one of the topics that need to be discussed in this forum is, and was discussed in the TSC meeting 2 days ago, is like APIs and documentation. I mean, do we actually want to go full scale on RST and try to describe everything in an RST, or do we want to use the power of Doxygen, which is we have, and you can do a lot of things in Doxygen that I think Riot.
I was going to look at him, and is already nodding his head to the point of we need more like context and what is the use of such or such thing. It probably doesn't start by the API. You need a higher level of talk about the concepts in more human, sort of like practical.
Yeah. Doesn't Riot actually still use Doxygen, or I mean, Riot?
I don't know. I never bothered checking. It looks like it could be. It looks like they might have everything in the Oxygen actually.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought they had everything
Yeah,
in
that
Doxygen.
looks very much like.
Yeah, and that's actually not bad at all.
Yeah, that's also an option, I guess.
Yeah, so it's something. I'm not saying go completely to Doxygen, but there are a lot of things that can be described, and then you have one single place for everything. But either way, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. So speaking of Doxygen, you can strike a balance, like you could have functions and struct definitions and some defines, and it integrates very well with RST. I don't know if it's being done currently like that. I know that that's slightly, different topic. Rust has pretty good documentation, and they do it in a twofold way. Like they have this Learn the Rust book and the actual documentation that, in my opinion, is very well written. And I don't know if it's the latest one. That's the book, actually.
Yep.
And the book is something I wanted to raise as well. Like, since I think that Zephyr is becoming like a good source of, maybe it's not as easy as, for example, Arduino to do stuff and teach in schools, for example, or in universities, but it's still quite accessible for many boards that have full support, and you could do many things. But the problem is that some things are not straightforward, and if there was, for example, Rust does it very well. They have the Rust embedded book that guides you, like here is a LED, you do a Blinky, here is a GPIO, and you can, and it does it using as an example STM discovery board, which is a very accessible board. And I was thinking that maybe it could be a good idea to have some kind of a structured guide, which could be then, which would serve like the, I'm very new to programming / embedded, and I would like to start with this project.
Yeah. As opposed to the current documentation, which is more like reference documentation.
It is like for people who know a little bit about both programming and embedded electronics. So yeah.
What was that?
Is it working? Okay. My point is a bit different right now. Okay, we have some documentation. Going back to the beginning, like you said that maybe it is your talk that the documentation may not align in one point with another. Are we actually, who is writing this documentation? Are developers? Are we actually trained to write good documentation? Do we know how to write good documentation? Are the maintainers like looking for the good documentation to be, okay, I want this documentation to be fixed, I want this to nicely integrate? I think that we have right now is like a mix of someone writing something, people that are not like really fluent on English, if we are talking about the English documentation. So I think we have a more fundamental problem. I'm not sure how to solve it, but maybe we should be aware of it.
Yep, no, that, yep.
Yeah, following this question, one thing that it's never really clear for me, it's what is the audience when you are writing documentation, right? I'm writing a documentation for a developer that is developing a new driver for Zephyr, or I'm writing the documentation for someone that is going to use, this subsystem or this part of Zephyr. So that it's also sometimes not clear,
Yeah, I don't know if there's a good answer to that. I think it, yeah.
I think the audience or the target audience really need to be clarified and need to be understood. Yeah, because as I was saying yesterday, or was yesterday, Zephyr is not a product. I mean, we are not trying to actually go and address a certain use case, etc. This is something that needs to be available for developers rather than, you know, users. Or it should deal with users, but users in the sense of I'm using Zephyr to do something myself. Maybe I'm not contributing back, or, you know, I'm just turning an LED on, off, you know, just to try things out. But it's not, the documentation should not go into the level of, hey, this is like a product that I bought and this is the manual of how I use it, yeah? That's because that goes into a completely different level. However, I think it has its benefits, but I don't know, if we don't define our target, then we will have mixed variants of the documentation, yeah, similar to was said there, and there will be no consistency. And the problem that you described is that depending on the developer, the language in one single file will be completely different, and you might be talking not only like in the form of talking, you will be talking to two different peoples or persons in the same sentence sometimes, if it's written by two different people. Yeah, we have 5 minutes, by the way, since it's,
I mean, I don't think, I mean, we can also switch gears to, I think I would love to do more around like surfacing the capabilities of like for all the boards and SoCs that we have supported in Tree. I think I don't want people to have to navigate like tons of DTS files to figure out whether such or such thing is supported. I think it's documentation worthy to surface that kind of information. Or to put it differently, I could pick virtually any board in Tree and look at this and double check with the reality, and then it would be just, so at a minimum, maybe we just need to get rid of that because I'm not sure that's helping anyone, but thoughts?
Well, I see where you want to take this, and you want to have documentation that describes every feature that's supported by a given board, but that kind of shields the user from DTS, and DTS is so...
At first, at least.
Well, yeah, I fear it's just gonna sort of delay.
But that's also shielding the user from DTS. You would agree? Like, what's the point of this then?
That gives you a quick overview of what's supported on this board. But if you want to dig into the details, I don't think we'll get much from auto-generating. We discussed this before, in auto-generating documentation based on the DTS from the board. I think I'd much rather have people dig into the DTS and try to get familiar with how that's done.
I think even before DTS, we wanted to auto-generate that, before we had DTS. And I don't think we ever agreed that the way it is right now, that DTS or auto-generating is the wrong idea. Yeah, it's just we didn't get to it. Yeah, we never got to it. I don't think this is describing. You know, the problem with that, the first problem is this becomes out of date.
I'm pretty sure
you know, so fast. Yeah. So either we provide something like this and we keep it updated, or we drop it completely. And if we want to keep that updated, the best way to do that is, and this is documentation, talking about the board. This is not talking about how do I write a driver and what the hell is DTS. Maybe at the end of the day, a user does not even have to look at DTS, because if you have to look at DTS and understand what DTS is, then maybe DTS is the wrong thing. You know, so there are a lot of things that would be abstracted and described in a DTS that the user might not even, you know, care about. Yeah. So
well, yeah, this is back to the sort of who is the user, but yeah, I would hope that some users, they don't have to care about DTS. Like they're actually going to write an application as just sensors are already enabled, blah, blah, blah. It's a dev kit. That's going to be their first 2 weeks into Zephyr. No
right,
DTS.
that first 2 weeks.
Yeah.
But coming from your talk, Anas, Zephyr is not the product. Zephyr is just a framework. And if you want to use this framework, you're not going to use it on a development board. You're going to use it on a development board for finding out what kind of SoC are you going to base your product on.
Right,
So
we want to
eventually,
enable, or we don't want to.
eventually, if you're going to use Zephyr, you're going to have to learn about this.
Yeah, I think the problem that I'm trying to solve is I want to make sure that people actually get a chance to try Zephyr and are not scared away by being like, I don't know if it's supported, I don't know where to look to know if it's supported. I'm going to look someplace else, like another vendor, another whatever.
Yeah, but I mean, okay, so I think we are conflating the problem, or we are talking about something completely different. We are talking about documentation here, and I think basically this needs to be up to date if we are to document that and show that. And the best way to do this, if we have the capabilities, is to auto-generate that. And one second, yeah, and I'm not saying we shouldn't document how to use DTS and how to understand DTS and how to change DTS and so on. That's a completely different topic. Right now, I'm talking about a board which has supported features, and maybe I am looking for something that I want to experiment with. And this can actually be useful, yeah, because I look at this board or the multiple boards that we have, and I would actually go pick one that has the best support for devices and so on.
So it better be accurate what you're going to see.
And then, this is like the entry point. Then you can go deeper and start looking at how do I use DTS and so on and so on. So it's a different problem. Yeah, either we do that or not do it at all. Yeah, sorry.
I was just going to say, for auto-generating this, could we use the supported tag and the board YAML, right? We have this list of tagged items that, granted, as far as I can tell, aren't fully standardized. Tests just say, dependencies. So we'd have to standardize them to get this to work. But if we did, then that's literally a list of what's tested on the board right there. And if the board's not failing tests, it's safe to assume at least that the examples build.
Yeah, but this list is also out of sync most of the times. Yeah, and actually the idea was to use DTS to populate this list as well, instead of relying on the manually maintained supported lists in a YAML file, which is for Twister. Yeah. Anyways, we are out of time. Yeah, just to let you know, because we have the next session.
We can continue the discussion in the Meet the Maintainers. Thanks everyone, because that was actually super interactive. So,
thank you.